Despite the costs involved, Man City are desperate to sign both Jack Grealish and Harry Kane. And let me just address something. Yes, I am in a tank top. Yes, I am horrendously sunburnt. Look at that. It's on my forehead. Oh, look at that egghead. It's on my nose. It's on my arms. I've got the farmer's tan going on. It's on my calves. It's awful, and it's also ridiculously, disgustingly hot in England right now. So I need a tank top, partly because anything else will injure my sunburn, and also because it's so hot. So apologies for showing up in this disgusting outfit I'm in, but hey ho, we move on. Back to the football. Jack Grealish and Harry Kane, both wanted by Man City. Not just one, either or, both of them are wanted in the same transfer window. In this video, I'm going to be discussing whether that's financially possible. I'm going to be talking about what the Man City team would look like with those two players in it, and I'm going to be talking about whether that would actually be beneficial for City going into next season. If you haven't done it already, you know the drill by now, guys. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you have subscribed, then share the channel with someone you know so we can grow. We recently hit 200 subscribers recently. You love to see it. So we're a fifth of the way to the first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Let's see if we can bloody do it wearing a tank top. Let's go. So let's start with the financial side of things, which at the end of the day is probably the most important thing, because if it's not financially possible, then it isn't possible. In terms of how much they are going to cost collectively, we're talking about a figure of around 200 million. It could be slightly under that, it could be slightly more than that, but at the moment, I'd suggest guesstimate as a Harry Kane. They won't sell him for 100 million plus a player. I don't think Tottenham are interested in a player, so I think we're looking at a figure of anywhere between 130 to 150 million pounds for Harry Kane for Spurs to want to let go of him. And for Grealish, against a very similar situation, Villa don't need to sell. Grealish is their star player. He's signed a long contract with them. There's also potential talk of an extension with Villa. So we're looking at a price of maybe 70 million, maybe even upwards of 100 million. But let's say around 130 for Kane, maybe 70 to 80 for Grealish. I'm going to call it 200 million just for a nice round figure. But you, like I say, you can probably give or take maybe 20 million under that figure or over that figure, depending on multiple situations. So this is the question: can Man City afford to spend 200 million pounds on two players in the summer transfer window? And the answer is yes. The answer is 100% they can. Now, they've never ever signed a player, you know, one of these huge players. They've never signed, you know, they never splashed 90 million on a Paul Pogba, 75 million on a Van Dijk, you know, 200 million on Neymar. Their most expensive transfer, I believe, is Rodri, who is under 70 million. I think it's around 65 million or so for Rodri. So they've never spent anything like the figures that we've seen quoted in the media. Like I say, for Kane, it would be at least 130 million. But they've said before they are 100% willing to do that for the right player. And we'll get on to the final stage of the video in terms of would these players be of a good fit for City. And they've said in the past, if they are a good fit, we will be splashing the cash. So that's a bit of a spoiler. Yes, they would be a very good fit. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's reel it in. Let's look at the financials. So as reported in The Athletic, Man City are looking to get rid of a lot of their elite development squad players, a lot of players from their academy. And I feel like these signings, as well as by me, are often overlooked. People look for the headline signings. They look at a Leroy Sané going away, for example, when the reality is, if you look behind the scenes, and by behind the scenes I just mean transfer marked, you can actually see all the very, very small signings, you know, maybe a 5 million here, 10 million there, but if you get, say, 10 million pound academy players selling off, that's 50 million pounds that you can allocate towards a net spend window. So this is where the crux is going to be for City, whether they can actually spend it. So for example, I'm actually going to look at my screen here because I've got all of them listed down here, talking about a 200 million pound figure that City need to hit. And immediately we've got 11.2 million for the Jadon Sancho transfer to Manchester United, because Man City had a, can't remember what the exact percentage was, but they earned some money from the sale to United, 11.2 million. Jack Harrison has signed to Leeds on a permanent deal for 11 million pounds. Lucas Nemeka, I believe that's how it's pronounced, has gone to Wolfsburg for 11 million pounds. Angelino, to be fair, I don't actually know if this one counts because it was earlier in the year, but it was still this year. Like, he's gone to Leipzig on a permanent, so that was 16 million. So I don't know if that should be factored in for the purposes of net spend, but I'm going to factor it in because I think it is, but I'm not 100%. And then there's all these younger players who haven't yet gone, but as reported in The Athletic, Man City are looking to move them on. If their price isn't quoted, then I've just gone on to like what their current market value is on Transfermarkt. So for example, Pedro Porro, £18 million market value. Yangel Herrera, £16 million market value. Ivan Illich, £7.2 million market value. Rodgers could move for a fee of around £10 million, and add all that together immediately. So before we've even talked about moving on any big name players, we're talking about £100.4 million. So call it 100 million. That's half what Man City need to reach in order to financially secure the services of Grealish and Kane from a purely net spend perspective. This isn't all 100% black and white, by the way. You know, FFP net spend doesn't 100% work like this. This is a very simplified format, but you get the idea. So we're talking about £100 million net spend, and in 2021 for a club like Man City, even after a pandemic, that's not that much. You know, that's not that much. That's two £50 million players. Without accounting for any sales. That's 100% achievable. We haven't even talked about the big name players who could be moving on, and I do think that at least one player will be moving on this summer, even though for me, I wouldn't want to see any City players move on because I like all the City players as they are now, but there have been a lot of murmurings from a lot of players that they aren't quite satisfied with the way things are going at City, with whether it's in respect to their game time, whether it's in respect to their status of the squad, whether it's looking for a new challenge. So the players we're talking about, by the way, this isn't 100% confirmed, like none of them have handed in a transfer request, but in terms of players who've made murmurings that want to move on, we're talking about Laporte, Riyad Mahrez, Raheem Sterling, Bernardo Silva, Gabriel Jesus. These are, obviously first team players. And in terms of those players most likely to go, don't see Laporte going anywhere. The main side he'd go to, like you think of maybe Barca, Real, who really need a really good centre half. They can't afford him because they're in financial difficulties. Raheem Sterling, I really don't think City are going to let him go, even though he has made murmurings that he potentially wants to go. He's not satisfied with his playing time. Even though, to be fair, at the end of the season didn't play that well, but the Euros he's played brilliantly, so I'm sure he'll get more game time. City want to tie him to a further contract, and why wouldn't you, because Sterling's brilliant. Riyad Mahrez, I don't see him leaving. Because if he leaves, then City need to sign another right winger. I don't know who else they'd have to play there, maybe Foden, but he's so crucial. And at 30, I think it's more likely they're going to want to try to sign him to a further extension so he can have his best years at City. And then we've got the two who I think are most likely to leave. We've got Gabriel Jesus, and we've got Bernardo Silva. And Bernardo Silva in particular, I love Bernardo. He's wanted to leave City for over a year now. He wants to go to Atletico Madrid, I believe. That's the word on the proverbial street. Potentially a bit of a weird fit. Don't know if it will work stylistically, but Bernardo is incredibly hard-working. He runs around all the time, so it probably would be a good fit stylistically. It just seems a bit of a step down. No offense to Atletico Madrid, but it's definitely a step down. I know they won the La Liga last season. Again, not trying to disrespect them, but it is just objectively true. I think he's one of the players who's not happy with the status in the squad. I don't really know what that means because he played a lot of games last season, but maybe that's because City didn't play a striker, so they had to utilise him. Maybe that's why he wants to go. And then Gabriel Jesus, he's not played as many games as he'd like to, and I don't think he deserves to play as many games as he wants to. He's now 24, he hasn't cracked on as much as I thought he would. I think he came to City when he was 18, 19, and really I haven't seen much progression. So, sorry Gabriel, but if anyone's got to go, I think it's got to be you, especially if we're talking about bringing in a striker. Is Gabriel Jesus going to be happy playing second fiddle yet again? Like he's been second choice to Aguero his whole time at City, basically. Is he going to be content coming up to, 24, being second choice to Harry Kane? I don't think he will be, so I think he would be the most likely to move on if we're talking about a scenario where both Kane and Grealish come into City. And in terms of financials for those main players, like I say, I think you could even sell those, or rather, I think you don't even have to sell those players, and you can still sign them based on the youth signings I talked about, the Sancho, sell-on fee, etc. But if we are talking about selling those players, for me the most likely ones to move on would be Jesus or Bernardo Silva, and we'll throw in Sterling. So for example, Gabriel Jesus's current market value is £54 million, Bernardo Silva's is £63 million, and Sterling's is £81 million. So even with the cheapest of those, or the lowest in terms of the lowest market value player, that's Gabriel Jesus, and if we throw him into the 100 million that we had before, that's 150 million pounds, give or take. Maybe he'd go for above his market value, maybe slightly under, but it's around 150 million. And 50 million spend net on Kane and Grealish is an amazing deal, especially when most of these players we're talking about fringe players. Gabriel Jesus wants to move on, and maybe City sell both Jesus and Bernardo Silva, or Bernardo Silva and Sterling, or Jesus and Sterling, or Mahrez and Jesus, some combination thereof. Then we are talking a figure over £200 million. So actually, we might not even have to get into the situation where we're discussing hypothetical youth prospects. City might just have enough money straight off the bat. So financially, absolutely, it's 100% possible for Man City to sign both Kane and Grealish. There are no financial fair play issues, as I've just demonstrated. Net spend, they can just get over the line. So now let's talk about how City would line up next season if they had both Kane and Grealish in the side, and maybe accounting for some of these sales going through as well. So the goalkeeper for City is going to stay the same. Obviously it's Ederson. This for me is going to be the best back four for Man City. You'll notice there's no John Stones in there. As much as John Stones has had a brilliant season, as much as I adore John Stones, I do think that with Laporte basically making murmurings that he wants to leave, he's not getting enough game time, he will be given more game time. He can't drop Diaz, so I do think that this will be the main central defensive partnership. Laporte for me is the best left-footed centre-half in the world also, and having a left-footed centre-half just opens up the space so much more for City. Walker's too good to drop, so I would personally have Cancelo at left back. Fernandinho has signed another 1-year extension to his contract, but he is going to be gradually phased out, and Rodri has to learn to take that role on his own. So I will say that Rodri will play that role on his own. Obviously, you've got De Bruyne. This isn't in dispute. De Bruyne is Man City's best player. De Bruyne is probably the most well-rounded player in the world, and that's not hyperbole. I think that's an accurate statement. I think, because of his defensive and physical attributes as well. He's certainly the best midfielder in the world. But either way, obviously you can't not play him. And if we're talking about a situation where Man City signing Harry Kane, then obviously Harry Kane plays here, and De Bruyne would not play a false nine. He'd go back into his role as a free eight in that central midfield. And this is where it gets interesting, because obviously we're envisaging a situation where Grealish signs for City also. If City just get Kane, then it would be basically the exact same setup as the season before. The only difference being, you're dropping Bernardo Silva, Gabriel Jesus, and you're playing Harry Kane there instead. But we're assuming that Jack Grealish is going to join City. So I have no idea what number he's going to be. Aguero's gone, as we all know, and he was number 10, so I've just given him the number 10 just because why not? I'm guessing Kane will want the number 9, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. He may be the women's sign, but there we go. So there's 2% potential positions for Jack Grealish. He can obviously operate in the attacking midfield area alongside De Bruyne as a free eight, potentially in that David Silva role. And actually, this is supposedly his preferred position for England. He wants to play in this number 10 role. City don't play with a number 10. They don't play a 4-2-3-1. They aren't like Man United, where it's totally focused around one player. They prefer to play, in general, with one more defensive midfielder holding, and then you've got two more attacking players. And maybe, and in the past, the optimum example is Fernandinho, De Bruyne, David Silva. Because Fernandinho was so good, you could do that. I don't know if Rodri's actually ready or good enough. I don't know if he'll ever be good enough, but I'm going to base this off the assumption that he will be good enough and we can free up more positions here, because if he's not good enough, then otherwise you're going to have to throw Gundogan into central midfield because he's a more defensive option, but De Bruyne can also press. But here's my potential issue with throwing Jack Grealish into the centre, is the pressing issue. David Silva, as much as he was known for his offensive attributes, his defensive work was absolutely criminally underrated. He was a brilliant presser of the ball. He worked tirelessly. He worked so hard for the team. And I'm not having a go at Grealish there, but it is just a fact. He isn't renowned for his pressing. This is why I think Southgate didn't play him as much as maybe he could have at the Euros, because he's not as defensively switched on as some other players. And in a Man City team, in a Pep Guardiola system, you need to be defensively switched on. So this is why I really don't think Grealish would play here. I think it would be much more likely he would be operating on the left-hand side, depending totally on Rodri, in fairness. If Rodri steps up his game and becomes basically Fernandinho 2.0, then I could totally envisage Grealish being able to play here. But otherwise, I do think it's much more likely to see him play, in general, on the left. That leaves a bit of a predicament in terms of what the best starting 11 is. Obviously, competing on four fronts, Man City and Pep will always rotate options. But the best right winger at City is Riyad Mahrez. And assuming he stays, Riyad Mahrez will start most games. And that leaves Phil Foden being forced to play in central midfield. It also means that Gundogan is going to be dropped, or if Bernardo Silva stays, he'll be dropped. But again, I'm working on some assumption that maybe Bernardo Silva won't actually be at the club. But for me, Foden has to play. He has to play. He played on the left wing most of last season. I do, however, think this is his best position. This is his future position, the David Silva position. Currently, Pep doesn't like to play him here because, as I've briefly covered with Grealish, you need to be defensively switched on. Foden is not quite there yet. He doesn't quite understand when he needs to press as well as other players. He doesn't quite understand when to track, when to fall back as other players. So that's why Pep has been reluctant to play him in this incredibly tricky role with a lot of responsibility. That's why he's basically shoved him onto the left wing to get him into the side. But with another year of experience, potentially, maybe Foden would be better suited for that central role. And like I say, I think that is his future role in any event. So for me, this would be City's best starting 11 with a Kane and a Grealish. Other options could be Foden coming off, Grealish moving there, Sterling coming on, because you'll notice there was no Sterling in that situation, and it would be criminal to not get Sterling into the side, but City is so stacked, it's tricky. Another situation is you could have Foden on the right because he can play there as well. We saw that for England, he's played there at youth level as well. It's actually his second best position, left wing being his third best position in theory. So there are options here, but I do think that the most likely situation for them, if City were able to get both of them, would be a situation like this. And just look at that team. There's no Sterling, unfortunately. There's no Bernardo Silva, there's no Gundogan, there's no Gabriel Jesus, but just look at this team. This team wins the league incredibly comfortably, I think. The only weakness, I think, is Rodri at this moment in time. If he's able to up his game, he just needs to be able to read the game a bit better. Fernandinho just needs to coach him basically from the sidelines. This would be unstoppable. I don't really care if Chelsea get Haaland or United get Varane and Ndidi, and Chelsea also sign like 5 centre halves or whatever. I don't think this team gets beaten. Or if Liverpool signs someone else and Van Dijk comes back to full fitness, I think this team dominates, frankly. And now I'll move on to sorry, as I'm just like going mad about this team, let's just talk about, would Kane and Grealish improve this City side? Of course they would. Absolutely they would. The Grealish one is slightly more questionable because I do personally think that Grealish is better than Sterling. He definitely offers something more, but the jumping quality between Foden and Grealish, or Sterling and Grealish, or Bernardo Silva and Grealish, whoever, is nowhere near the same level as the jump between Gabriel Jesus and Kane, or false 9 Bernardo Silva and Kane, or false 9 De Bruyne and Kane. This is the difference maker. Grealish, as much as I love him, basically he's give or take at this point. Sorry, there's a fly in this room. He's basically give or take at this point. Harry Kane is the difference maker. As much as I've talked about how I would love if City got Haaland rather than Kane, because Haaland's younger, Kane has injury issues, Kane's older, there's less sell-on value, Haaland's just more interesting, he's more of an out-and-out striker. Harry Kane is basically perfectly suited for Pep Guardiola's system of play, the way he's able to link in, the way he's able to drop back, as we saw with England, link with the wingers, is also just lethal, constantly outperforms his XG, which is something that City have struggled to do in recent years. Throw a Harry Kane into Man City's side, I think they probably break all sorts of goal-scoring records. I think Kane probably scores 40 goals in a season, not necessarily in the Premier League, but across all competitions, because the amount of service he'd be getting from De Bruyne, who I've already touched on, is the best centre midfielder in the world. Some people would say Harry Kane's the best out-and-out striker in the world. I'd maybe say Lewandowski is a better number 9, but as a player, Harry Kane's quality is indisputable, and yes, it would totally transform City. What do they need? What did they miss all of last season? A striker. No offense to Gabriel Jesus, he ain't it. Sergio Aguero is it. He wasn't played even when he was fit. When he wasn't fit, he wasn't fit. And Harry Kane, very different player to Aguero, but he's basically the perfect signing for Man City. He's the final piece in that jigsaw. If City get Kane, I think that's game over. If they get Grealish, that would be a massive bonus, obviously. I love Grealish. He's such an entertaining player to watch. It would add It would probably give City a different dimension they haven't had since Leroy Sané left with his brilliant dribbling. It would also allow Foden to play in that central midfield role. I do hope Pep has the faith and confidence to allow him to play that role. If they sign those two players, I think that's game over, and I think that Man City infinitely are a better side, and I just think they win the league. And I honestly think they win the Champions League as well. Well, on paper, they should. But they should have won it last year, and they didn't, so you never know. I said at the start of the video I'd talk about 3 things. I've just realised right now in my brain I want to talk about a 4th thing. So we've covered, is it financially possible? Yes. How will the team look? It would look incredibly terrifying. Would those 2 players improve Man City? Absolutely. Harry Kane more so than Jack Grealish, but I think Jack Grealish also adds another dimension, another option. My only issue with potentially signing Jack Grealish is that I can't foresee a situation where you've got both Jack Grealish and Raheem Sterling at the club, because one of Jack Grealish's positions is one of Sterling's positions. Oh, actually, I didn't think about that. Another option is that Sterling can play on the right. Oh, yeah. That's also a thing. So maybe it's not an awful situation. You could interchange with Sterling and Mahrez, and that would still work. So actually, that scenario has become even more likely in my brain. Yeah, so it's brilliant. That's another option. Fantastic. But I want to talk about a 4th option, and that's linked to the first one in that, is it financially possible? Yes. Is it feasibly possible? Not financially possible, feasibly possible. Because Spurs don't need to sell Kane. Villa don't need to sell Grealish. Are they going to want to get rid of their star assets? Even if we're talking £100 million for Grealish and like 150 for Kane, whatever, are they going to be willing to sell? Because in some instances, those players are priceless to that club. Villa are making some really interesting moves in the transfer market, and they're going to be wanting to push for Europe. I think they will do all they can to convince Grealish that, look, we want to get Europa League next season. We want to be pushing for Champions League next season. If you stay here and you like captain us to that milestone, you'd be like, I mean, he's already like a hero for Villa, but you know what I mean? Like, that might be worth more to him than competing for a title with City. I don't know. Harry Kane as well, he doesn't strike me as the sort of person to force a move from Spurs. Rightly or wrongly, he comes across as a loyal character. He hasn't handed in a transfer request yet. He's just sort of made inferences that he wants to leave. He's made implications that he wants to leave, and people have inferred from that he wants to leave, but he's never actually came out and said, I want to leave. He's never put in a transfer request, and if push comes to shove, and if it comes to the point of Man City basically saying to Kane, look, you need to force the move. We've done all we can on our end. You need to do that. I don't know if he does that. I don't know if he takes that final step to force his way out of Spurs. I don't think he's the guy to make that sort of fuss over himself. In the final days of Jose Mourinho, for example, he was the only one who stayed fiercely loyal to Mourinho. Everyone else had turned. Harry Kane was the only one who stuck with him. And I do think that will come across. So I actually don't think Man City will sign either player. Even though I've talked about how it's financially possible, how it would work tactically, how scary the team is, I don't think they sign either of them. I think Jack Grealish is the less likely of the two, because I think Harry Kane is the number 1 target for City. A striker is the number 1 target. They'll have other options though. I don't think either will happen, because I don't think either want to leave so much, because they're both loyal to their club. And fair play to them. They don't have to move. Obviously, I would love to see it happen, but I don't think it will. Let me know what you guys think, though. I've been talking for ages. How long is this video? I've been talking for 30 minutes. I talk shite for so long. But let me know what you guys think about everything I've covered in this video. So what are your thoughts on the financials? What are your thoughts on how it's... So, for example, let me know what your starting 11 would be with Kane and Grealish. Let me know whether you think those players would improve the team and how. And most importantly of all, let me know if you think it's going to happen, or do you think those players are going to stay at their club or not. That's been the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll repeat, make sure to like, subscribe, share the channel. If you enjoyed the video, if you like this format of video where I just talk at you for a while, let me know. Do make sure to follow all of my socials. There'll be links in the description for all of them if you haven't already. I think basically everyone watching this has already followed me on Twitter, Instagram. They join the live streams on Twitch, etc. But if you haven't, then you're a little rat and you need to do it right now. Until then, guys, I am out. Sorry, it's been a while since the last video. I've mentioned it in the end of the last video, but I did go on holiday, hence the sunburn. I'm going to try to be uploading a few videos a week now. For example, now I won't talk about what I want to talk about next. You'll find out in the next video. But yeah, until then, guys, eat, skeet, delete, and have a lovely day. Bye.